The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services, a leading provider of quality and experienced virtual chief information security officers for small and mid-sized businesses. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. JC Gaillard joins us today. He is the founder and CEO of Corix Partners and is also the author of CyberSecurity: The Lost Decade. JC, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Greg. Very happy to join you on the virtual CISO moment. So as you said, I'm JC Gaillard. I'm the founder and CEO of Corix Partners, and Corix Partners is a boutique management consulting firm I founded about 10 years ago. I'm French and British. I've been living and working in London since 1993. My career is rooted in financial services. I spent about 10 years at Paribas before it became BNP Paribas, and about 10 years at Rabobank, where I was the chief security officer of the international division. And I created Corix Partners about 10 years ago. And effectively, as I was exiting Rabobank, and I've been very happy to work with a large number of clients over those 10 plus years, helping them sort out their cybersecurity strategy, organization, governance challenges. And that's essentially what we do at Corix Partners. And for the past 5 years, I have been putting all my articles into a book called CyberSecurity: The Lost Decade. Every year, I publish an updated version of those of this compendium of articles, and I'll tell you a bit more later about what's going to happen with the book in the near future. So that's about me in a nutshell.
Oh, very good. And so you primarily with Corix Partners, you deal with the financial services industry right now?
No, absolutely not. We've been working with pretty much all industry sectors over the years. Financial services included, but also the logistics sector, the manufacturing sector, retail, travel, you name it.
So you've been exposed to a large group of different verticals and all that. What would you think would be in your mind, one of the more significant threats to small and mid-sized business information security today?
Well, it's an interesting question. The work we do at Corix is mostly with large organizations, okay? Mm-hmm. But we are often in contact with smaller businesses. I want to start by saying there is a big difference between small and mid-size in my experience. And to be honest, it's also an important factor in trying to understand what you need to do around cybersecurity. It's not the same when a 10 or 20 staff organization doesn't operate in the same way as a 200 or 300 staff organization. So I think there is a big difference here between small and mid-size to start with. And I want to start by saying that. But having said that, my experience working with those type of organizations is that, to be honest, very often the threats are nested, if you want, in the mindset of their leaders, okay, very often. When I talk to many of those guys, I get the sense that they don't really know where to start around cybersecurity. That's the dominant thing I get. They don't really know where to start. There is a lack of understanding about what it means, what needs to be done. And it leads to all sorts of misconceptions, frankly, around cybersecurity. And those misconceptions come out very quickly in conversation when I talk to leaders in small and mid-sized organizations. Or you get all sorts of things. You get things like, we're too small. Nobody's interested in us. We're too small. Nobody knows we exist. We don't have anything of value. Well, listen, look at what's been happening over the last few years. Ransomware has been targeting all sorts of organizations, irrespective of size. Okay, right. So this is the kind of things that has to be put into perspective a little bit. Then you get things like, we're in the cloud. It's fine. We're in the cloud. Okay, it's not our problem. We're in the cloud. Well, yeah. Then again, it's an interesting statement. It's yes, you can outsource your IT. You can maybe everything you do is in the cloud, but you cannot really outsource your responsibility. You cannot outsource your liability to your clients. You cannot really pretend that regulation doesn't happen around those things, doesn't exist. It does exist, and it holds you liable. So, fine, you're in the cloud, you think you're okay, you think cybersecurity is not your problem because it's the problem of your cloud provider. But as a matter of fact, you can't really ignore the fact that it's your responsibility, it's your liability. And when you start reading the small prints, in the contract with your provider, you may have surprises there. Okay, so again, putting things in perspective is important. Then you get stories like, oh, we can't afford it. It's too expensive. We can't afford it. Well, in large organizations, this is an argument I dismiss. Okay, this is an argument I'm not spending 3 minutes listening to. In small firms, I can hear it, but again, cut it down in small chunks. Try to understand what you're trying to do. Be more palatable, and you will be able to achieve more. Maybe in the package you're buying from your cloud provider, there are all sorts of security options you can activate without paying more. Try to find things you can do. It doesn't have to be expensive. It's not about buying the next shiny tool. If you're struggling with business people who would think they must have a 6-digit password, don't listen to vendors trying to sell you zero trust and quantum encryption. Okay. You have another problem, all right? So to me, it's all about helping leaders in small and mid-sized businesses, putting things into perspective and understanding the problem they have. And I think that's the real threat, if you want, that it leads to inaction. Sometimes it very simply, prevent them from doing anything. They don't know what to do, so they do nothing. Or they jump in bed with the first vendor and they buy some sort of turnkey solution from an MSSP. Okay, we all know there is no silver bullet in this. So you'll see, this is, when you ask me about threats, that's the way I tend to see it with small and mid-sized firms. That sort of mix of denial and simplistic solutions is to me the real threat to small and mid-sized businesses, and that tendency to try to make the problem disappear either by brushing it under the carpet or making it someone else's problem. I think that's the real threat. I know I'm answering. I may be answering a different question, or you may well be expecting a different sort of answer. But that's the way I tend to approach it.
Yeah, no, I think denial is a good point, and I often will say that sometimes the C-suite and the board of directors, if they don't have the sufficient information to make risk-informed decisions, then they can't make risk-informed decisions. But what happens if they don't even want to know that information? And that gets into the denial part, where it's like, what do you think is like maybe a root cause of that sense of denial? I'm
going to say, if they don't want to know, where are they living? Okay, honestly, cyber threats are everywhere. Good cybersecurity is just good business. Okay, it protects your reputation, it protects your employees, it protects your clients, it protects their data. It's a pillar of digital trust. It's just good business. You just have to listen to what's happening around us. Cyber attacks are happening every day. This is not made up. Okay, and it can take your business down. Okay, fine. You may think you have bigger priorities. You may think, yeah, okay, fine. I'm aware that there are cyber attacks everywhere, but I've got bigger problems. The business is not doing well. We've got this project, we've got that project, we're buying that firm, we're merging with those guys, whatever. Okay, you may see the situation under that prism as a business leader. But when is it going to be your priority? When the screens are dark? Do you think that's good business? I don't know. I'm just saying the time has come, in my opinion, where we need to. It cannot just be a bottom-up game, if you want. It's no longer down to the techies to push the message to the board and senior execs. They have to wake up. They have to wake up and lead. They have to wake up and understand that this is just good business. Sadly, not all organizations are well managed. Not all firms are well managed. That's the long and short. And not all firms do well. And many firms get hacked and go down and suffer. That's I don't know what else I can say.
Well,
maybe it's the only way many of those guys will learn.
Well,
I'm sorry, it's a bit pessimistic here.
No, I don't think so. I think it's realistic, and I think that sometimes, if you think about like the board of directors, and they, if they're recruiting for a new CEO, that they should want to get a CEO that understands the risks in cyber, even if the board doesn't understand it, because as you said, it is a business risk. It could be a significant business cost.
And in large organizations, you have checks and balances at all sorts of levels. Okay, you have an audit and risk committee, you have a compliance function, you have all sorts of corporate structures which are forcing the top execs to look at the problem in a certain way. In small and mid-sized businesses, it's less the case. It's less the case, and you have much greater diversity in terms of maturity levels, and honestly, it's if the guys at the top don't want to hear it, I think to a large extent they will learn the hard way, and it's pointless to hide behind cyber insurance these days, because to be honest, cyber insurance is well, I don't want to say it's not worth the paper it's written on. That would be a bit harsh, but it's under scrutiny. Okay, insurers are concerned, of course, by the level of cyber attacks and the level of claims they have to deal with, and exclusions are more and more prominent, and cases are more and more difficult. And generally, if you are not at an acceptable and demonstrable level of maturity, you will struggle with the small print again, or you may not be able to afford it because the premiums will be too high. So, cyber insurance is not something you can rely on, as a silver bullet.
Right. Well, I want to pivot to I like the title, but I want to understand the title of your book, The Cybersecurity, The Lost Decade, and then the subtitle, Security Governance Handbook for the CISO and the CIO. What do you mean by the lost decade?
Well, the book is essentially a collection of articles. As I said, I started writing articles regularly on social media and on the Corix blogs in 2015. Because to be honest, because I had enough of seeing too many people going to conferences and repeating endlessly the same sort of things. And I remember going to a conference. Actually, a colleague of mine went to a conference and reported back to me the keynote. I think it was made by a KPMG partner, I think, or somebody of that caliber. And at the end of that keynote, the guy says something along the lines of, what's fantastic about cybersecurity is that everything I've just told you today, I could have told you 10 years ago. And that, to me, is not something I can live with. Okay, we need to start moving the needle here. We cannot just carry on repeating endlessly the same mistakes. Okay, so the lost decade means very simply that it's a title which goes back to the WannaCry incident in 2017, because actually it's in 2017 that I started publishing this first compendium of articles, the first version of it. And to me, when I looked at what I was hearing around the WannaCry incident and the NotPetya incidents, I was hearing exactly the same sort of stories I was hearing 10 years before. Okay, large organizations struggling with the timely deployment of security patches and all those things. Honestly, 10 years is a long time. Okay, how can it be that a large organization, spending millions and millions on cybersecurity is not able to get those type of practices in place over such a long period of time. That's what I mean by the lost decade. And until we start looking back at where the roadblocks are, which are preventing organizations at executing on security measures, nothing will change. Okay, large organizations have been struggling with that. Knowing what to do is reasonably well established. Large organizations have been spending millions or billions collectively with vendors over the past 2 decades, and we're still struggling with the same sort of problems. That's not right. So until they start looking back at where the roadblocks are, nothing will change. That's the story, if you want, behind the title and behind the book. And my take, and which is developed through those articles, is essentially that the problems are rooted in culture and governance, and that's essentially where it goes wrong. Okay, constant deprioritization, constant short-termism by business leaders, preventing cybersecurity to be properly deployed across the depth and the breadth of the enterprise. Of course, in the context where the enterprise is changing, business is changing, and that's before we start talking about global events like the global financial crisis or the COVID pandemic.
So it's sometimes it seems like that and I'm thinking about in large organizations that have a CISO, that the tenure of the CISO is they're there for 18 months, maybe 2 years. They come in, they perceive a problem, they get funding for some great tool, they put the tool in, and by the time the tool is in and configured and is showing that it isn't really having that return on investment that it had that it was being sold for, the CISO has moved on. To me, when you talk about like the lost decade or that lost time of opportunity, I think fundamentally that at least an aspect of it is the mentality of thinking that we can come into an organization and immediately fix it with technology. Because as you said, we've been spending billions and billions on all of this tools, but nothing's changing.
This is exactly at the heart of the problem, the idea that this is a technical problem to be solved by technical means. This is not as simple as that. Okay, you absolutely need to take into account cultural and governance issues so that you can actually deploy those protective measures. Because the scenario you've just mentioned is a little bit idealistic, to be fair. You're right. The new CISO comes in, he looks around, builds up a roadmap of some sort, gets started in the deployment of it, and in the large organizations, then things happen or not. Politics come into play. Things happening in the business, top exec changing, a merger, an acquisition, priorities shift. Your fantastic project gets deprioritized, or the funding you were promised doesn't materialize. Or politics, poor governance, paralyze execution. You have this wonderful tool, you want to deploy it worldwide, except that, frankly, there is no governance to support that worldwide deployment because the company doesn't work that way. Okay, and 2 years later, you have deployed 25% of what you wanted to deploy. You have suffered like hell because those things are hard. You're frustrated. The phone rings. It's a fantastic job elsewhere. More money, different challenge. Off you go.
And the circle repeats.
And then for 6 months, there is no one.
Yeah.
Or 3 months, whatever. And then a new guy comes in. He's got a different idea, a different pet project, different conception of what should be done, and this thing starts again. Yep. And that's one of the dimensions of that spiral of failure, which has prevented large organizations from making progress. But at the heart of that, you've got adverse prioritization from the business, short-termism, deprioritization, those kind of problems, leading to frustration for the CISOs and that sort of merry-go-round of cyber leaders.
So you mentioned before we started the recording that you have an update to the book coming out soon?
Yes. So the cybersecurity the last decade is, as I said, is a collection of articles published since 2015. And essentially, there is a new version of it coming out on the February 21st, which is now called the CyberSecurity Leadership Handbook. Okay, and it's the same sort of concept: articles put together in categories, for people to try to get a grip on how to make it work in real life effectively.
And you said that that's out on the 21st of February, right?
21st February on Amazon, and if you track me down on social media or on corixpartners.com, you'll get all the details.
Okay, awesome. And hopefully we'll get a link in the show notes to it as well. So very much looking forward to that. Do you have other writing plans after that?
No, well, I've got some, but I'm gonna keep quiet on for now. But to tell you a little bit, what I'm thinking is essentially to start writing on that kind of spiral of failure we were talking about. Okay, the trying to architect a little bit the things which go wrong and prevent large organizations from delivering around cybersecurity. So trying to put those things into perspective and deconstructing, if you want, the backbone of that spiral of failure. That's a little bit what I've got in mind. I've been writing on it recently. My most recent articles tend to revolve around that, but I've got the idea of putting that into a book as well. So that's just an idea at the moment, but that's where I am.
No, I think that's a very good idea. I think that if we can break that spiral, that is the way that we're going to make the most inroads to solving a lot of these security issues. And during all of this, you're still going to continue with Corix Partners providing the services that you do, right?
Totally, yes. I mean, I'm enjoying a lot working with fantastic clients and helping them out. And yes, everything I do, everything I write about comes from the field. I'm not. I don't make those things up. I absolutely want and need to keep that link to the real life of organizations.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the update and to hearing more about the potential future project that we didn't really want to talk too much about, but talked a little bit about.
That's it.
I really appreciate you joining us today and taking a few minutes. I know it's in the morning where I'm at, and it's in the evening where you're at. So I appreciate that and spending some time with us today.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for having me, and yeah, a great discussion. And I look forward to telling you more, probably probably next year, I suspect, about the other book.
We will do a part 2, without a doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you, and everybody, stay secure.
Thanks.